commerce, because I've been asked them in multiple ways. It's like, why did the Klan just come once to Maxville? And my dad was there during that. It wasn't even an altercation, they were, the head guy was dehooded, and they said, we know who you are, you're not welcome here, you need to leave. And people ask, well, like, that's not a typical story, why is that? But if you're dealing with professionals that you brought in to make money, they were pulling millions of board feet of timber, virgin, ponderosa pine out of this area. And the Klan, I'm sorry they don't have that much power to mess with the whole area's money, because then it messes with Klan money too. It's so convoluted. Now, I can't tell you a place that I've read that, but using common sense and knowing that big timber companies weren't in this county before that point, and they were employing and raising the bar for every family in this county during that time. They had a mill in Wallowa and another mill in LeGrand in the next county, and so they were doing business.
Welcome, everyone. I don't know what time it is whenever you're hearing this podcast, but we are so happy that you're here with us. Dr. Thomas Rashad Easley. Of course, I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Bennett Lupo, and we are starting this 6th season of the Wallowa podcast off wonderfully. You know that we always talk to leaders across the country, really world, that are having a positive impact and on whether their community, and also we're talking about the environment, or we're talking about our natural resources. And today we really have a wonderful, amazing, brilliant, and beautiful example of that. And so we're going to talk to you today. You're going to be learning about the Maxville Center that's in Oregon, but that's just a touch. I'm going to stop right there. Because I really want you all to learn more about this beautiful place and space that was created and founded by our guest. And our guest today is the founder, and I think, and please, you can correct me too with this, the executive director, of the Maxville Heritage Center. And we're talking to none other than Miss Gwen Trice. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
It is an honor and a pleasure to be able to share our story, my story, with you today. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And we have kind of like similar roots, I know, like coming from, like other parts of the country, particularly having like those Southern roots, but you have a very, I guess it's a beautiful, and I think it's a deep, and I'll just leave it at that type of adjective right now, but story to tell us about you, about your family, but also about the center, about the museum, excuse me. And so what I like to do, and you give me the permission, to say Gwen. So Gwen, thank you so much for allowing me to be personal with you. We have met in person.
Yes.
It was an amazing time. The last time I was in Oregon a few months ago. And thank you so much for your hospitality, because Bennett, she stayed later than she needed to. She had closed down and was so gracious and merciful to me to just come on in here and show me everything. And I think when you see it, I'm gonna say when you see this beautiful place, you'll see that it's telling a story, and it's so important that it be told from this individual, because I think that it's a narrative that if people didn't know this, it will go unnoticed. And then when people do tell it, they're not going to tell what happened, and they're not going to tell what people, experienced. So Gwen, we're just going to go ahead and just dive right in, please. Okay. Can you explain? Well, wait. Oh, I'm sorry, Gwen. Hold up. You're sitting in front of something. Hold up. What's that in the background? Talk to me.
I picked this image today. We just had our 100-year our centennial celebration of this site. And the site behind me is of the Maxville, the original historical Maxville town site. And what's behind me right now, and I'm just going to turn my head a little, if there's a tree, a lone tree that's in the middle. It's not timber, it's a different type of tree that's standing there, and it is growing right in the middle of center field of the baseball diamond that was at Maxville, where black and white teams that were both Maxville teams played against each other. And so to see that and to have that archaeology work really designated and to know where that is, it fills me up, because I am a descendant of the Black loggers that were recruited to Oregon in the 20s. So my father and his father were recruited from where they lived in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, as experienced loggers up to this site in the 1920s. So in 1923, when they came by boxcar from there, my dad was 19 years old. So my mom wasn't even born yet at that time. And so my mom, when she met my father, it was during World War II, after he was an older person. He was almost too old for World War II and too young for World War I. And I think he entered when he was around 39 years old into World War II. They met in, I believe, Florida. She was working in the PX, and he was a sergeant in the Army Air Corps, and he was playing the piano. And of course, thinking about PX, it was segregated, so it was all black PX that they met. And she said he was good looking and he was single, and boy met girl in the PX, and he ultimately sent for her and her mom and her family to come and live in Eastern Oregon. And so this was well after my mom was even here.
I got you. Okay. So you have pictures of this.
I have pictures. I have original pictures of the baseball, a baseball game going on right here behind me. And you, in the picture I have, the old photo, you can see all the 1920s cars, there weren't many, parked along the tree line in back, and the game in the foreground going on in front of it. Powerful.
And and this land that we're talking about now, when we were talking earlier, did you say you all own this land now?
Yes. So on June 10th of 2022, we officially became the owners of 96 acres of the original historical Maxville town site. And then an additional land brings us up to 240 acres, including timberland that surrounds it, the riparian area, the logging pond, the dam that has the logging pond, the headwaters of Bishop Creek. So it's belongs to our organization today, and we are in a process of developing it as a brave space for all of us to come and we get rooted in the space, be rooted on the land, be rooted with the history, be rooted with ourselves and with our trauma and with our healing. We're creating spaces for healing and art. And I like to say STEAM projects, because the sciences are very much a part of this land. And it's already been designated, since we've been working at the site, as a archaeological site. And we've had to go through the our state historic group to do that, as well as the indigenous archaeologists in the area. And so that's a big part of it. And it's just been nominated for Historic Register for its archaeology. We're also making sure that it goes in as a multiple property document inside of that for African Americans that lived in rural property spaces. And we are restoring an original administrative building that the company that came from the South with them built out of the original logs of the site. We're restoring that on the site. It's happening as we speak. And so it's exciting to have that multiple use. It was for administrative. It was used in the time for gatherings like taffy pulls and meeting spaces. And we're going to use it to help support our work. Of course, it will be interpreted inside of the space, but it'll be used for all of the educational work with students, lifelong learners. We think about the stars. So I like to call it stargazing, but actually every civilization on the planet has used the stars for navigation, propagation, escaping enslavement. And I say that to say this, that Harriet Tubman, like me, was also a logger's daughter. And she used the stars as well to navigate. And I want to say, I thought I'd heard that she was going to be on US currency soon. And I hope that's the truth, because that's a deserving position.
No, definitely. Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for explaining that and sharing that with us. And I think now with people, well, I mean, you kind of, I think, went into explaining like maybe some, maybe like a part of the project or maybe like an easement project, but it's the Maxville Heritage Interpretive Center.
So let me just make that more clear too, because our site, our museum site where the tourists and folks come to, is located in the heart and center of the Arts and Cultural District in Joseph, Oregon. And so think about my county. Wallowa County is large. I would, larger than Rhode Island and a half, I believe. And about a little over 7,000 people live here. But during the tourist season, we get over 100,000 people from all over the world that come to this beautiful spot that's been called the Swiss Alps of the United States for many, many years. And it's pristine and beautiful. It's just, it holds a place. I understand now why my dad was here and his father. My dad was a hunter-gatherer, and all of us kids learned how to dress wild game and fish and birds, and he had a walk-in meat locker on the side of our house. And so he was dedicated also as a conservationist and politically savvy in many early years of his life. I mean, I want to say too that he was the first district commander for the American Legion in the state of Oregon, and that happened in mid-1950s. And so he dedicated himself to community, as well as people of color in his community, but he dedicated himself to the community and the land, and had a strong relationship with the indigenous population. And I'm grateful to say that I embody a lot of that spirit in that work.
Wow. Okay. All right. What can you tell us, about the Maxville Heritage Center then, and
Yes.
why did you start it? What does it mean to you? And just what's actually going on right now?
So truly, when I graduated from high school, I was 17, and I moved out of the house a couple of weeks afterward in one of my grandmother's rental homes, and got my dog, and I was just, moving out. I'd gotten a job at the phone company, and 9 months later, it was just, I couldn't stay there any longer in La Grande, Oregon, where I was born and raised. And that's just one county over, about an hour and 15 minutes from my house, where I lived here in Enterprise. And I struggled when I was raised here, because I wasn't represented from first grade through 12th, and there was nobody that looked like me in any of my classrooms. And when they would show like a National Geographic, which was typically like, great, the lights are going out, I don't have to interface, I can watch a movie. But then they'd have like Native Africans and the women that didn't have anything on top and they were dancing. And I think I would be able to enjoy it if I were by myself, but the whole student body would stare at the screen, and then they all turned and stared at me and back. And that was one of many ways since I was in first grade that my teacher set me aside from my fellows, and that I was made to see that I wasn't like everyone in my space. And I would struggle with not being a part of throughout my school years. And I did well. I loved to learn. I loved everything about school, especially when it came to earth sciences and backpacking and going up into the mountains. I fell deeply in love with my earth science teacher. And she actually got a chance before she passed away to come up to this land and to see my good works and to be proud and stand for what I was doing. But for me, as soon as I got out of high school and had my first job, I left right away, but I went to Seattle, worked at Boeing for 20 years, raised my son. I was an actor, did voiceover work, did a lot of work around writing screenplays. 2000 and 9/11 happened, 30,000 people lost their jobs, including me. I was training at that time. I was in the training departments. So the whole building, everyone I worked with in training, I was part of a group that we would create the training. So I was an instructional designer. We would create the training, and then we would go teach it in the lower 48 states to all the Boeing satellites that we had across the land. And so what they decided to do is to outsource our jobs. So there goes the rest of the retirement. And they said, well, because 9/11 hit the airline industry, you can also go to college. And I went right into Boeing, from seriously, didn't get that opportunity. But while I was at Boeing, every class, the things that I took, they paid for everything. So I've got 900 hours in how to build computers, and I built them for my mom, my son when we went to college, my own video studios that I built and worked with those things. So I really got a lot of good help, but I really wanted to just go to college and just do that by full time. And that's when I got my video degree, graphic design, animation. And when I got all of that, right around 2002 is the first time I found out that my dad was a logger. I had no idea. My family had always done janitor work. My grandma, my auntie, my mom, the kids, we were all enlisted as littles to go in and clean the medical buildings, clean the attorney's offices. My dad had those businesses. He had multiple other businesses as well. He cleaned furnaces. He had a janitorial service of his own. For a period of time, he had a coal furnace because everybody had coal heat during the time. And so he was constantly doing different things. And I'll just say right here, my dad went to 4th grade, but he was also, you didn't have to go to high school to be a captain of industry in that time either. He had his pilot's license and he flew a private plane around the county, and he got that after the service, not while he was in. So he really was a liaison between the people of color and the white community growing up, and supporting and making sure that there was peace. If there was anything that come up, then the white community would come to my father and say, can you help us with whatever's going on? But what I found out doing this work is he was also an unofficial Green Book guy. When I was little, people stopped at our house all the time. They'd knock and he'd go outside. And I used to be inside and I'd peek out the window. I'm next to the youngest out of 7. And there was all these people. I'm like, we're so popular. That's so wonderful, you know. And I'd go to my mom. I'm like, should I fix some lemonade and go out? And she'd look at me like I'm crazy. She's like, no, go clean the oven or do something else, because we weren't aware and it wasn't shared with us what was happening. And so truly, you know, growing up in this space was difficult. And as you became 18 or you know, as people became adults, and LeGrand had a large Black population, people couldn't get work. And of course, during the time when it became World War II, a lot of the Black population, they would continue to move to Portland. But that was a big draw, was to go to Vanport and to go to those spaces to get and do the work. And a lot of the people some of the younger generations that came were not seasoned loggers, and they couldn't take that kind of work. And so it was easier for the young 18-year-olds that were coming from the South to get out of the South to go to a bigger place where they could find more opportunity. But for me, and I was never coming back. So when I heard about it, when I found out about the work, when I found out about my family history, it drew me home. And really, when my earth science teacher took us on backpacking trips into the Wallowas, into the Eagle Cap wilderness, I fell in love. And I at 14 years old, made a plan. I was coming back home. I was going to marry a cowboy, live in a log home. I'm going to have kids bite through the umbilical cord, plant the placenta under a tree. I was a bit of an earth muffin, raise horses and dogs. And that was my plan at 14. So when I came back home, that didn't happen. Although I got the dog and the home, and I've been riding horses since I was a little girl. So I continue to ride, and I go to certain places where I know that I can still, I love the wilderness. I love wild. It's just beautiful, even if I can't touch it or be a part of it. I love that the deer jump over my fence and they sit under my apple trees. And I saw a fawn, and I think that she had these two little babies in my backyard, and she was getting up on two legs and eating the apples and the leaves off the apple trees. So I have a different life, but I was never coming back because of the racism, because of the energy that came out of Eastern Oregon in the 60s and 70s. And I remember at 8 years old when Martin Luther King was murdered, was assassinated, that I'd never seen like my whole family cry, and the church and all of us got into this place. The Kennedys were murdered, and in my head, because I didn't understand it and it wasn't explained, I thought that they would come and kill us too, that it was just a matter of time that we would be killed. So yeah, and yes, Oregon was an extremely, in the 1920s, it was essentially run by the biggest social club, which was the Ku Klux Klan. Klan for kids. Women had huge parts. They burned crosses outside of this place. So when my dad lived here, it was still on the books that the exclusion laws excluded free Black and biracial Black people from living, working, owning land, and doing business. And he lived here then, and now we own it. And that helps to heal my heart and my spirit. And that's one of the main things this work has done for me, is created healing by getting into the middle of the work and providing a space for young people that are in school, that they have representation of who they are in the spaces, They may have parents that don't look like them, that they may have been adopted. There's many stories in our counties of many kids being adopted from different countries that don't have a connection to a sense of self. And I didn't want to be me. I didn't want to be brown. And it took me leaving and coming to in many different ways of connection that I was able to love that woman in the mirror so much that I couldn't dream of being anybody else. And to be able to come home and through my perspective and through the voices of our partners and other hidden stories, other hidden histories, that I work not to tell their history, but to provide a platform that we can all tell an inclusive American narrative.
Well, what would you say the overall sentiments of the center, there in the community, and how has the current political climate, affected, how you continue to, to grow, the Maxville Center?
Yeah, it's been really odd. And I've had a chance to travel in different countries, and different parts. I think I pretty much lived in Pacific Northwest, but I've had a chance to go to Cuba, to England, to Paris, to Germany, to different places, and just to talk to people and understand the nature of the impact that it has. And it's different for every group. So when I left, it was like the 70s. And back in the day, a Black person were to move next to your house and you were white, they would sell their homes or you'd be harassed out of the space. So when I moved back here in Enterprise, I was afraid and I didn't care because I'm making my space and I belong where I belong. And so I bought my house and I started moving my stuff from my garage to the back door, and I didn't go out front. And I was like, I don't want them to be mad or sell their houses, but I'm not leaving. And one day these two women on either side were hanging their laundry and said, hi, hi, welcome. And they started talking. And the older woman on one side, she goes, are you related to Art Trice? And I'm like, well, yeah, that's my brother. He goes, well, in the 60s, he married our niece. And I've got pictures of your nephews and all these things. And people started knocking on my front door, the elders in my neighborhood, and saying that they were so glad I was there and they appreciated me and was so glad to have me in the neighborhood. And I would go to the hardware store because I like to be hands-on when I work on my home. And I would get hugs and I was constantly crying because people kept hugging me and loving on me. And I was like, I was like, think about SpongeBob being dry. I'm SpongeBob and I'm dry. And when I come home, I'm like, back in Bikini Bottom. I just have to say it that way, is I felt that I got what community looked like in some ways. And I know that like I'd go into the Safeway store and I'd go by or would be getting my prescriptions and all the elders, the eldest of us, oh, you're that woman, I got a story for you. So I wouldn't get a Safeway for 3 hours. And so I'd have to bring a digital recorder and just always listen patiently, and started doing interviews of these elders. And most of my interviews when I began they were in their mid to late 90s. And I had people say, well, don't go to them because they're racist. They hate Black people. They hate, and the N-word was used a lot, not to me, but in the videos. And it's interesting. We'll go there in a minute, but I would call that really racist guy and wait for you to call and would want to have a conversation, because it's part of their story. They want to be a part of their own story. And it was so important that I tell this inclusive narrative. And so I kept going in, and I'd go to people's homes and I would set up my video equipment, and we would have like the talk before the camera came on, and meeting folks, but then I'd always insist that they sit in their best place, but that it would just be them and I in a space. People have a tendency to be more open if they don't have family around. They are more truthful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would set up, and we'd have the video, and I'd have certain questions, and some folks, you know, you could just let them talk and they would tell you the juice. And, you know, and then there's the interview after the camera's turned off. Then they tell you more. So sometimes I would leave it on just to get some of the juice, and then come back and say, hey, this is what you said, and can we reiterate? Can I film it? Can I record and honor what you're saying? And then after that last interview, and I pack up my things, are going, well, we got some food on the stove, and sure wish you'd break bread with us, or you know, we got an extra bedroom in the back, and you know, you're welcome to spend the night here anytime you want to, you know. And what I've done is triggered sense memory in these elders, and they remember the relationships that they had. And so from the eldest, I've gotten deep respect and saying, it's important that you're here, Gwen, to tell this work through your perspective. And then there's folks that have been here for 50 years that have grown up for a period of time. They're like, why have I never heard about this? I just, you know, and others that say, she's lying. That didn't happen. And what I love about that, because there have been key people in our community that have said that, and the elders have heard them that were here. And they dispelled them. They said, she's not lying. We knew her daddy was a fine man. He did this and this, and she's telling the truth. And so it's, you know, that's in the beginning. And since the climate of the last administration and the pandemic, I've not had any outward hurtful meanness, but a lot of the people that were in my corner are just quiet. And that's hard. And as it gets further along, and I see the elders that live here, and I go into Safeway, they nod and say, how you doing? And some of them will come up and still hug and just love on me. And this is my community. And I love where I live. And, you know, I found that even in Seattle with so many people, which to me it was more sort of international, and the places that I went, and a lot of the people that I was drawn to was the dance community. So I'm a major Cuban salsa dancer. I dance every kind of salsa, though, from all ranges I can follow. And I love it. And I performed on stage with the Afro-Cuban All-Stars, and I've broken bread and danced with folks from the Buena Vista Social Club. And what I loved about that community is it was many people from many cultures coming together, and maybe we didn't know how to speak to one another. We didn't know each other's language, but when we were on the dance floor, we spoke beautifully together. And we were respected by each other, and that fortified a lot of my journey, was knowing that I didn't have to change the way I speak and my rural culture to be accepted. And I thought for a while when I first got to the city that I would have to learn how to blend in more with the Black community, because most of my friends have been white my whole life. And so if I hung out with white folks, they're like, what are you doing here? And I'll go out with the Black folks, and they're like, you're too white, you need to go. Or, you know, and it was so difficult and decide, do I need to change? And I'm so grateful that I didn't compromise the essence of who I am as a human on the planet to be accepted into a group of people. I belong everywhere I go, and I share that.
Yeah, I like to. I'm just moved. If you meet in person, it's even more, just godlike energy and peaceful, gracious energy. So thank you for being open with us like this, Gwen. Thank you for listening to the Heartwood Podcast. We are able to provide this broadcast to you because of the partnership of Yale School of the Environment and the Easley Branch LLC. If you are interested in any other content, particularly from the Easley Branch, please visit our website at theeasleybranch.com. Thank you. Bennett is doing, and please, I'm not speaking for him, I'm just reading the question. So
Okay.
You can jump in. You can jump in, brother, if you want to, okay? But my brother, he's doing something similar this summer. He's working to daylight, Black history in Minnesota. And that's an area where people don't associate Black people with. And I understand that because, I went to school in Iowa, and I'll admit, being from Alabama, when I got there and they went to a city that was like all Black people, I'm like, wait, what? So, whether it's historical or present, and the question I'd like to ask you, because you are highlighting, you're highlighting this history in an amazing state. Why is this important for this type of research in the Pacific Northwest? And I'd say globally too, but in particular, why in the Pacific Northwest is this important?
Well, I think it centers for me in Oregon and the laws that were on the books so late. They were the only state in the Union that joined the Union of the United States with their own constitution excluding free Black people. And it went against the United States Constitution, but they did it, and they made their own guidelines and rules. They brought Black people into places that people were shocked and appalled and frightened, which is just like into places for commerce. Because I've been asked them in multiple ways. It's like, why did the Klan just come once to Maxville? And my dad was there during that. It wasn't even an altercation. They were, the head guy was dehooded, and they said, we know who you are, and you're not welcome here, and you need to leave. And people ask, well, like, that's not a typical story. Why is that? But if you're dealing with professionals that you brought in to make money, they were pulling millions of board feet of timber, virgin ponderosa pine out of this area. And the Klan, I'm sorry, they don't have that much power to mess with the whole area's money, because then it messes with Klan money too. It's so convoluted. Now, I can't tell you a place that I've read that, but using common sense and knowing that big timber companies weren't in this county before that point, and they were employing and raising the bar for every family in this county during that time. They had a mill in Wallowa and another mill in LeGrand in the next county. And so they were doing big business. And that, I guess the crosses on the hills were just a gentle reminder to stay where you are. And of course, Oregon has a lot of sundown laws. And I think a lot of those sundown laws were strong in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know about California so much. Mr. Lowen, who wrote a book called Sundown Towns, I met him at my first historic conference in Oregon, and I was the only Black person in this historic conference, except for one person that worked for the state. And I'm like, I drove 6.5 hours thinking I would see other people that can look like me and help me out to do this great history. And after talking to experts in the field of Black history, Dr. Quintard Taylor, and in Washington State at University of Washington, and then I can't think of the other. I apologize. I can't think of his name at Portland State University, who's retired now. I talked to them both and sat down, and they're like, we don't know anything about Black loggers. This is on you. You're going to have to do this work because we don't know, and we're 2 years out with our backlog. We can't help you do that, but we support your work. And so it was me or nobody. Now I've connected with other folks that had done work in the past that they didn't share their work with us, but I had a chance to meet with other loggers' daughters, and at least one other that was African American, and she had a different agenda that I wish her well. That because I think in this work there's room for everybody, all of us, to lift these voices.
And from the sound of it, it sounds like it wasn't just Black and white loggers, it was just a coalition of different races coming together in one area.
So in Maxville, they had Greek loggers as well. And there was a logging camp down in Dry Creek, is another area where the Greek camp was. But Angel Metropolis married a white woman from Promise, Oregon, which is a homestead town, and he lived in the town of Maxville. And actually, after the town dissolved, he and my father went into business on Main Street in La Grande and opened a hat blocking, shoe shine parlor, sportsman paraphernalia business, and we're lifelong friends. And so there were many loggers, Greek loggers at Maxville. There were some at the Mount Emily Lumber Company that also had Japanese loggers there. I got a chance to interview a Native American woman before she passed, and she talked about being a little girl at that logging company, riding their ponies on the hills, and just the life they had. And that she says, I remember the day that the two government men came to take the Japanese people away. And she said the whole camp stood for their friends, their community, and said, these people are not our enemies, they're our friends. And really wanted to make that stand. And of course, they didn't have any power over that, but that haunts me, that stays with me. There were at Vernonia, Oregon, it was a camp that happened later. They had a Filipino quarter, Japanese quarter, and African American quarter in that logging camp. So there's other towns that don't exist anymore, but what it does is it gives us a fingernail, sort of if you're looking at it like you got a 2-inch roll of tape, you're trying to peel the corner, you just got to get that start, right? And then you can peel it out. And that's really what they gave us. They gave us the corner so we could begin to peel that out and continue to talk to different communities, not just in Oregon, but in Washington state. I know that there were some logging camps that were all Japanese. I heard of one in Washington. There's another one in Southern Oregon that was all Japanese. I think it was called, the town used to be called Mabel, Oregon. It's just, here's the thing is the more we dig, I know there were Guamanian, Hawaiian loggers. There were all these people. This is in Oregon alone. It's part of the American narrative. And the whole point is I want to tell the story, and I won't say not to mention, but absolutely mention and talk about the indigenous people that were here thousands of years before colonization, that were stewards of the land. And so I've had a chance and opportunity to go to tribal council and talk about my dad's connection to the work, to bringing together huge volunteer teams for fish hatcheries to assure that the native fish will be here, will thrive. It's all of our work, and we're working to understand more about how the indigenous, the Nez Perce, and the Confederated tribes of the Umatilla. Tell us about your stewardship practices. We want to understand, and we want to embody that. We also want to, as we do interpretation, is to bring the Nez Perce language. They're working to build that, and to have the Nez Perce language on site, to be able to connect with the young leadership in all of these groups as we lift the voices. And it doesn't leave out anyone. We want to honor the American narrative inclusive. But for us, we don't start with just us. We want to start at the beginning of the beginning, before that colonization happened. And so we had our centennial celebration last month, or in June. Make sure I'm in the right month, in June. A 2-day celebration with drumming groups and with honor songs and prayer and conversations, and to have the Nez Perce on our land, our land, I say all of our land, and to identify first foods, to identify native plants, and to really think about how we get to reimagine Maxville in the future for the next generations to be relevant 50 years from now, 100 years from now. Mm-hmm. That keep this brave space to have this brave space in perpetuity. So that's where it comes to that sort of, what does it look like legally? We're very fortunate to have a very strong and pro bono legal support to help us build that, which has been a comfort. They've been with us for many years now, and they're proud. I got a chance to go and speak to their groups, and it's funny because the elders in that group didn't know a lot about the exclusion laws. And so we begin where we are. I think that's part of what we work toward. We have a lot of people that say things that could be construed as disrespectful. But when you're dealing with people that they're beginning their journey of understanding about others, they're going to speak with what they know. And when you can see the effort, and you know that it's not done in a way that's meant to be hurtful or microaggressions. It's not that. Here's a great example. I'm interviewing one of the elders. So what were the names of some of the Black people? Well, there was Inward Bob, there was Inward this person, there was Pinto. Well, Pinto had vitiligo. There was Lightning, so he must have been really fast. My dad's nickname was Pygmeat. I don't even want to go there. You know? And they said, Gwen, we're not going to pretty up the story. These are the names that were given to them, and some of them still use them and others didn't. But I know that the timber company made it very clear. It's like, you don't feed them in your house. If you want to feed them, you feed them out in your yard. You don't let them call you by your first name. They're lazy, so you got to watch. There is, I've got interviews and transcripts that convey this. And my interviews were very frank. And I didn't, for one time, flinch, because we need to know our history full bore. We need to understand the nature of how people were encouraged to be. We need to understand that they brought in Southern Black and white loggers and created a segregated town with 2 schools right behind me in that space, 2 different baseball teams. The only concession, is they did have, when they played other teams in the region, they teamed up to make a super team and whooped butt. So, the Timbertown did have their own baseball club. And I wonder, was that to have a place for diffusing energy or opportunities? I know that a lot of the homesteaders came from West Virginia. Some of them 5 generations with their wagons came up. And there's a saying in the coal mines, everybody's Black. You got to watch for and make sure that you're helping each other. And just that one article that I read, that in the 30s, that this young man, 19, was hit by a dead tree. And my dad, at 36, he picked him up, put him over his shoulder, and he ran with him about a mile and got him to health. And generationally, I'm friends with that family today. And when I was giving a presentation in Salem, Oregon, one of his daughters stood up and said, "Your dad saved my dad's life." So there's all of these levels. There were activities. 4th of July was big. They would come together and break bread. And keep in mind that the food was regional. They all liked grains and a lot of that. So there were a lot of things that were shared. But then there were a lot of things that weren't. And I would just like to I think about my one interview with a man named Charlie Trump. He was a master fiddler, taught many, many kids how to fiddle. He's an old fiddler contest winner, I think 18 times. And he'd give each kid a fiddle when he was done. When I interviewed him, he was one of my first interviews. He said, "I remember your dad came to the Grange Hall with his wife." And I'm like, "Wait, his wife?" Because my mom wasn't born yet. So, not knowing about who your parents are, he came at 26 and he said, "Boy, your dad sure could dance." And I was playing the fiddle. And I just thought, it's what a beautiful opportunity to get to know my father when he was a young man, and what he believed in and what he stood for. This is a healing project. We're working on trauma and healing right now in that space, and working with 2 amazing women with, I believe, I'm going to say it wrong. I want to say Oregon State, but I think they're the University of Oregon. I'm not sure. And we're working on healing in the environments, and they represent Afro-Indigenous Caribbean. And their work is profound. And I'm so looking forward to bringing that to our space. I think over the last few years, we've all had a big hit in our psyche and our spirits. I've lost at least 5 people since 2020, and my family, as well as some friends too. And just with all of that takes away, and you can't catch your breath and you can't catch up, is to have opportunities for healing on the land, and healing in safe spaces, training the trainer, having BIPOC training that's separate from our dominant culture too is really important, so that people can speak frankly and freely about what their needs are and how they can find relief, shelter from the storm.
Well, in brilliant fashion, you actually answered all of our questions without me having to ask them. I told Bennett, I said, we'll put some in bold. I said, but the other ones we'll have there, but let's see. And I mean, seriously, when you actually answered all the questions, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to do it, so I really do thank you as I won't say like this, as a forester. I appreciate the work that you're doing. And as a Southerner, I really do appreciate what you're doing coming from Alabama. And then as a Black man, I really do appreciate this, because when I was going into forestry, this would have been in the 90s, so, I'm proud of my age too, and it would have been in the 90s. I was always wondering, like, where are the other, Black people? And when I would go to conferences, I go, where are the other Black people? What was fascinating is when I started working at NC State, then I had white people asking me, okay, well, where are the other Black foresters? And there was a part of me that was, I'll be honest, that was like, didn't like that question coming from them. Because I'm like, who are you to ask me that question? So I never answered them. But it did send me on a journey to start like digging, into like, where are we? And I got to uncover some things that were going on in Tuskegee, Alabama, and at Tuskegee University, where they were teaching forestry. Like that technically was like the first school that actually was that was teaching the actual skill. But they always say that it's another place, and it blows me away. Like, we really got to learn more of this history. So there's still a lot more that I have to learn. So I'm not going to act like I'm knowledgeable of it all, because I'm not. But I appreciate you for intentionally healing yourself, your family, but then others too through this work. Thank you for how you treated me when I was there in Oregon, and every time that we talk, and I really do, and I won't speak for Ben, but I do think that he'll echo like we wish you nothing but success. And before we close out, what I just like to ask you is, because we have we have a nice audience, we have a nice listenership, knowing that you're based in Joseph, Oregon, knowing that we are running this through the outstanding Yale University. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us, just to close out, to say like that we didn't ask you, that there wasn't in the questions, but that you like people to know, either about you, about the Maxville Heritage Interpretive Center, about Joseph, Oregon, or just about the future work that's coming? If you want to do all four, we'll sit here for it.
Oh.
I'll say it again because I got it in my head. I'll say if I need to say it again, I got you.
I know. Okay. I'm going to start on your way because I'm not very linear. Number one, I would like your audience to know that we're looking for like-minded hearts and spirits to support the effort and to lift up all of our voices. And that whether you look at it as a volunteer, even a donor, it supports the spirit of the work. It supports other organizations as we look to our future. We're looking for like-minded ideas and knowledge bases from people as we begin to reimagine how Maxville will be used in the future. There's lots of people that are in the industry that can do it, and they represent colonization and dominant culture. And with the way we've gotten it so far, I'm not saying that I'm not open to that, but I want it to be people of color involved in that reimagination as well, that we all come together and get feet on the ground or virtually, however it is appropriate, to make sure we do it right, because our future is at stake. I think more about me. The last few years have been really tough. They've taken a health toll. I am in a process, and my board, I love my board. We're building that in the same way. So we have people out there that are considering that, which would be it just builds muscle tone for our organization, to not just have this black-led person, but have that muscle tone inside of the organization. And I'm not talking about, I don't want to be hardcore in your face. That doesn't get us anywhere. I have always asked for what I need. Okay, on occasion I've been called the crazy lady. Because when I first started looking at this site, I went to the owners, which were a large timber organization. I said, I'd like $90,000 in access to the land. I didn't get $90,000, but I've had access to the land since I've started this project. And I've got an intimate relationship with this land. And when I come up, I feel my grandmother and my father and my grandfather, my uncles, I feel my cousins in this space. And so that's really powerful. So I think about that type of muscle tone. I think about my health. And as we're in a blessed space with, we got $750,000 from the Oregon State Lottery to restore that lodge at the site. So that's huge. It's on historic register now. That's huge. And so I'm constantly looking at how do we do deferred maintenance funding in perpetuity. That's another really important part. But just the voice that it's kept is going to require more than the visionary. It's going to require subject matter experts in different fields to really bring this together in those spaces. And I'm looking to, we just brought in an AmeriCorps Rare member, which are graduate students that are knowledgeable in rural spaces like food systems, economic development. And we're bringing in this wonderful Latina woman that is really connected with us. And so I'm so excited to bring her voice in to share it. I'm also excited to be able to maybe take more care of myself. I've done a lot of administration over the years. I actually invested my 401k from Boeing into this work because I believed in it so much. And I am in a place where I really need to enjoy the camping, the hiking, the backpacking, horseback riding, going to the coast, going out of the country again, and being more well-rounded and not so focused. I'm an artist at heart. I want to get back into my dance. I want to teach salsa up in this region and have some Afro yoga. I just see myself, my healing. I'm in line. I'm going to be the first in line for the trauma and healing stuff. So I feel, again, it's like, it's what you do up front. I'm going to action how this is what it looks like for me. And so people can follow or find their own path. That is exciting. And what did I miss from those questions?
I think the answer that you made about yourself, I asked about the center and just, if there was anything else, that you wanted people to know.
Yeah, so the Joseph Center, we're so excited about the work that's going on there. And we've been working with congressional funding with 4 other organizations to redesign it in such a way that it brings it up to the next level, and to have an ease of use for the visitor that comes in, as well as the docents that's there, and then the people that are in that space. And I'm so grateful. I have to just say, I'm so grateful to everyone who has volunteered with our organization. We have partners and places that I never thought I would have partners in, people who have traveled across the state to lift up our voices, and professionals, elders, people who are bringing their young children in to volunteer and help to, again, action behavior that teaches them that this is what it looks like to work side by side with each other. I'm so grateful for the partners in this community and across the state, and deeply grateful for the Smithsonian Institute that has been watching our work and made it very clear that they care about what we do, and that we weren't so small to be overlooked, that they've been here, they've been on site at the Maxville town site, they've been at our events, and that we're loved. That still is amazing to me.
Well, I want to say thank you for, like I said, answering our questions, but more importantly, thank you for upholding the stories and the narratives of our ancestors, and you, and of course your family, but then so many other families. And thank you for displaying the courage, going into these places to also get this, some will call it data, Some would call it, information, but I just think that you're getting truths and you're getting life stories and you're getting, how we got to where we are now, which is, I think it's always a challenge to share the truth. And I just want to thank you for, for actually doing that. And I just wanted to see if Bennett has any last words or anything.
I just want to say thank you as well. There's a lot of similarities. What you described in Oregon is what I saw in Minnesota. So it means a lot to hear what you're saying and like the path of healing that you're finding. Because I think that's something that a lot of people, if you're not growing up in the city, is something. If you're not growing up in the city in the South or predominantly Black area, it's something that it's needed, like going back and finding that place to heal.
Yes.
And then also just the whole project that you're doing. I remember going through Idaho and seeing the Confederate flag. So knowing that something like this is out there on the eastern side of Oregon is important to me. Because I love it's beautiful out there. It's pristine. I love it. So.
And you're welcome anytime. We'd show you what we love, and our partners would be welcoming as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, everyone who's listening, we want to say thank you for checking out the Hardwood Podcast. This is to talk about a powerful, positive, and explosive kickoff. We just did it, by talking about history, talking about true lives, and talking about, I'll say it like this, talking about forestry. It felt good to talk about my discipline, and to do it with, I'll say it this way too, with two people, who I share heritage with. So it's good to, and I say it that way because in the end, we are what we do. And what we do is we do our best to take care of our family and take care of our histories and our community. And as we also just learned from our guests, we got to make sure that we take care of ourselves. So everyone, please do all of that. Take care. Let me say it this way. If you're taking care, make sure that you're giving care. Okay, make sure that you're giving care. And if you're giving care, please make sure that you take care so you can give more care, and vice versa. It's Dr. Thomas Richard Easley, hip hop forester, my co-host and friend and brother, Mr. Bennett the Lupo, and we just had the pleasure and the privilege and the honor of talking to Ms. Gwen Trice. Thank you again. Everybody go look up and learn some more about the Maxville Heritage Interpretive Center based there in Joseph, Oregon. And when you get a chance to go visit, and then also when you have a chance, also go and support. We thank you again. Until next time, Hardwood Podcast out. Peace.